seriously wounded. Joining me now is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and a veteran of the Iraq War, Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego. Thank you for being here, sir. First, I want to start with your reaction to the news you just heard. 3 U.S. service members are dead.
Well, this is always the fear, and this is why it's so important that we actually have real leadership that understands the consequences of war. And as someone, unfortunately, who I had to experience also in a legal war, there's nothing worse than seeing your friends die for a cause that isn't in the national interest of this country. I was actually with my mom this morning at breakfast, and she reminded me about the feelings that she had knowing that I was in the middle of a war and not knowing if I was alive, I was dead for a couple of days, and now we're putting potentially tens of thousands of our families going through that. With a president, by the way, that has not had one real press conference to really explain to the American public, why are we putting our men and women in danger? What is the national interest of our country going to war right now? And why are we going to expend potentially the blood of Americans and potentially destabilize a whole area? There is no leadership right now that's coming from this president, and we're in the middle of dropping bombs right now, and men and women are dying.
Well, Senator, he did a video in which he said that there was a threat from Iranian missiles on the American homeland, and some senior administration officials did a briefing with reporters saying that they got some intelligence that there was preeminent strikes potentially coming from Iran because of the threat of U.S. forces. Have you seen anything to back that up?
Again, these are excuses. I mean, these are excuses, and there was no way that any Iranian ballistic missile can hit the U.S. mainland. That is just entirely false. But the president actually had an 8-minute conversation, a one-way conversation without taking questions, but then went to a long fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago the whole time. He spent more time raising money for millionaires than to talk to the American public who are about to send these poor working-class kids to go defend the interests of whom? The United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Qatar? We don't know. And we don't know what the end result of this. There is no plan. There's no clarity of decision of where we're going. There's no clarity of who's actually going to take over in Iran. And we may have made things worse, not better, because sometimes the persons that take over tend to be the hardliners because they're the ones that are surviving.
Well, an extremely hardline leader, the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is now dead, as are several members of the top leadership. Is that a good thing?
Certainly it's a good thing in the sense that he's a horrible person. But the question is, what is the plan now? Who's going to take over? Who do we negotiate with to actually get out of this? Because it sounds like right now, hope is the plan, right? I hear Lindsey Graham saying, I hope things go well. President Trump saying, I hope the Iranians take over. When countries depend on their foreign policy ending with hope, it usually does not end up well. I am one of those persons that had to live through that. What you have to actually have is a clarity of plan, of mission, and what is the exit strategy here? Right now, we're just hoping something happens in Iran so that way things end well. That is not in our national interest. What we just did was essentially go to war on behalf of at least a couple interests in the Middle East, and now they have no plan to get us out of this. How is that going to end up helping us be safer, our allies be safer in the long run? And in the end, how is, again, this in our national interest? It's not.
Well, the Iranian charter is death to America.
Look, I mean, are we going to go to war because people say mean things to us? That's not serious policymaking. You go to war to defend the national interest of the United States. You go to war to make sure that Americans are kept safe or our national interests. You don't put men or women online because people say mean things to you. That is not how you actually do real national security. That's what teenagers do.
And what about supporting terrorist proxy organizations globally?
There are so many ways that you could actually erode and fight terrorism globally. While you could even do kinetic strikes, you could do surgical strikes, you could do it on the spot. But when you've gone and done a full regime change and you're still not explaining what the plan is here, you actually could create a situation that could be worse. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this all ends up well. The problem is we're all saying this word hope, 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 and yet we're using men and women, American men and women, to actually execute a flawed plan. We're using, by the way, very limited munitions already to defend our allies and ourselves in a region that is going to continue to have a lot of situations while also distracting us from China. And none of this is, again, pointing to us actually having any direction that actually helps us understand and fix this in regards to our personal national interest as a country.
You're on the Homeland Security Committee. How concerned are you about the proxies I was just talking about, or even Iran, carrying out some sort of retaliation on U.S. soil?
We should always be aware of potential terrorism. You know, we have a very good professionalized force. Homeland Security now has $175 billion more than they ever had. So they're going to have sufficient amount of manpower and in time if they focus on this versus going after some of these, undocumented people that are here and should not be priorities. So there is an opportunity for us, obviously, to make sure that we're right-siding Homeland Security, that we have the internal security we need. But the best internal security we need that we could have, the best security we could have in general, is for us not to start stupid wars without any actually idea of how the outcome is going to be finish in a good regard for us.
Senator, the Department of Homeland Security is currently shut down over a funding and really a policy dispute. Does that need to be rectified ASAP because of the potential threat here since the war began?
Certainly, but the Department of Homeland Security has, again, $175 billion. They have agents that are hiring every day. They have ICE agents that are coming out of their training camp every 45 days. They're going to be paid. They're still going to get paid through the shutdown because it's a separate line of funding. We can definitely work to fund, especially CISA, FEMA, and TSA, and let them be funded, and everything else will be fine. So there's a lot of ways that we can be doing this. But this idea that there's our Homeland Security officials, the professionals, are not doing the work right now is actually absolutely false.
Senator, you have called for the Senate to immediately return to session and vote on a war powers resolution that could block the use of forces in Iran. How do you see that going down? What do you see the language of that being, and where do you see the votes?
Well, I know I'm going to vote yes. This is an illegal war. The justification for war is not there. It was made up. From some of the things that we're gathering, Iran actually had conceded a lot to the point where, again, there was no imminent threat of any nuclear capability. Another senator talked about them potentially being able to load a bomb and send a bomb. That is absolutely ludicrous, and not even close to that. And so, the president has not justified at all why we are at war. So for me, it's a very simple vote. It should be everyone's very simple vote. But why are we engaging in any type of process conversation? We know what happened here. This was a BS reason for us to go to war. This president talked all the time about how he was going to keep us out of war, all the time. He also talked all the time about exposing, the pedophiles on the Epstein list. Coincidentally, that's also happening right now. This president talked about that. He talked about running to end wars and expose the pedophiles. Now he is starting wars and covering for pedophiles. And it's not a coincidence. I think that's all happening at the same time.
The argument, which I know that you have heard for the why now, separate and apart from the very different things we're hearing from the administration and Democrats who have seen the intelligence and others in the intelligence community about the imminent threat, was that this is a moment in time that hasn't presented itself in decades, that Iran is at a very weak point. You don't think that that was a reason to take out the supreme leader and to try to denigrate the military command in Iran?
So we're essentially attacking a country because they're weak, not exactly in our national interests, is what you're saying. No, I don't think so. I think what we have to do when we act, when we use our men and women, when we use our prestige around the world in terms of calling in allies, when we're potentially distracting ourselves from China, is that we're doing it because it's in the best interest of our national security. And also, by the way, when you do it, what is the exit plan? Right now, it seems like the president has a day 1 plan, a day 2 plan. What is the day 10 plan, the day 20 plan? What's going to happen when we start running out of munitions? What happens when we start running out of Patriot batteries? These are the things that a real leader would understand, would actually plan out. And also then you would actually go back to the American public and explain to them what victory looks like. Because no one's actually has described victory right now. And if you can't describe victory, then you don't really know how to put a plan together. And all right now, I think they're running on is a hope that things end well. And I hope it ends well too. But leadership does not. Leadership requires you to actually have a plan and figure out how to execute it to keep the American public safe and to actually make sure that it is in the national interest of this country.
Senator Ruben Gallego, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up,